Today we are going to be looking at the EU internal market. One of the primary objectives of the European Union is to create a fully integrated and homogeneous economic market in which free movement between member states is guaranteed. This is referred to as the common market, single market, or internal market, and has been defined as an area without internal frontiers in which the free movement of goods, persons, services, and capital is possible. Now let's take a look at each of these areas. Free movement of goods in the European Union has been created through the establishment of a customs union between its 28 member states. Within the EU area, this has involved the elimination of 1. Customs charges or tariffs or taxes on goods coming from other member states. 2. Quantitative restrictions on goods coming from other member states, for example, quotas on the amounts of goods that may be imported from another member state. And 3. Measures having the same or equivalent effect to a tariff or a quantitative restriction. Article 36 allows member states to restrict the right of free movement of goods where the restriction is justified on grounds of public policy or public security, etc. As regards goods coming from non-EU third countries, an EU common customs tariff has been created applicable to all goods entering the EU. However, once inside the EU, third country goods may circulate freely. Article 29 of the TFEU provides that products coming from a third country shall be considered to be in free circulation in a member state if the import formalities have been complied with and any customs duty or charges having equivalent effect which are payable have been levied in that member state. Now, let's take a look at workers. Article 45 of the TFEU requires that member states abolish restriction on workers coming from other member states and in particular discrimination based on nationality as regards employment, remuneration, and other conditions of work and employment. Article 45(3) grants workers the right to 1. Accept offers of employment actually made by employers in other member states, 2. To move freely in a member state for that purpose, 3. To stay in the member state to carry out the employment, and 4. To remain in the member state after the employment has terminated pursuant to the regulations drawn up by the Commission in this regard. All EU nationals benefit from a general right of residence in other EU member states. Thus, EU nationals can choose to reside in any member state of their choice. The right of residence is set out in Article 22A and Article 21(1) of the TFEU and proposes every citizen of the Union shall have the right to move and reside freely within the territory of the member states, subject to the limitations and conditions laid down in the treaties and the measures adopted to give them effect. Now let's take a look at the areas of establishment and services. Article 49 of the TFEU defines the right of establishment as the right of any natural or legal person or entity to set up a business in any member state and to pursue commercial activities. Thus, a company or a self-employed person from one member state has the right to establish a branch or agency in any other member state and to carry out its business activities there. Pursuant to Article 56 of the TFEU, businesses also have the right to provide services in other member states without actually establishing a branch or agency in the host member state. Thus, under Article 56, a bank in the United Kingdom can contact clients in other member states and offer to provide banking services for them. And finally, let's look at the area of capital. In accordance with Article 63 of the TFEU, capital must be allowed to move freely between member states. The free movement of capital requires the suppression or exchange controls preventing the transfer of money. Free movement of capital was established prior to the establishment of the euro, as otherwise it clearly would have been impossible to have a common currency. Now, let's take a look at the principles on which the single market has been built. As we have seen, the TFEU provides for the free movement of goods, workers, establishment and capital between EU member states. However, the success of the internal market has been undermined by the fact that member states are permitted to restrict free movement where the restriction is justified, for example on grounds of public policy or public security. In the area of goods, such rules are sometimes referred to as non-tariff barriers or NTBs. For example, each member state might have different rules in place controlling the manufacture of toys in order to protect children. These rules are perfectly reasonable, but they interfere with the creation of the internal market, as a toy manufacturer, wishing to sell his products on a pan-European basis, must respect 28 different sets of member state rules. It is for this reason that the TFEU provides for the adoption of directives to approximate or harmonise such regulatory rules, thereby facilitating the creation of the internal market. Initially, the Union authorities sought to harmonise the different regulatory rules in place in each of the member states, seeking to create a single pan-European regulatory model. However, this project proved too ambitious, and instead of harmonisation, the then European Community adopted the new approach. Under the new approach, the Union authorities use a mixture of harmonisation and mutual recognition to create the internal market. Under this system, directives apply over two stages. First, the Union will adopt a directive harmonising those regulatory rules it considers vital for the protection of the market and consumers. Under the new approach, this is referred to by the European Commission as the harmonisation of essential requirements. Then, second, once this basic pan-European regulatory standard which applies to all member states is in place, the principle of mutual recognition applies to all other member state regulatory rules that have not been harmonised. Thus, a product manufactured in a member state in compliance with EU harmonised rules can then be sold throughout the EU. In other words, mutual recognition is applied on a bedrock or a foundation of harmonised rules. Member states may require, if they wish, that products manufactured in their own state meet higher standards than those established by the applicable EU directive. This is called gold plating. However, such rules cannot be applied to goods coming from other member states, which can only be required to meet the standard as set out in the applicable EU directive. Consequently, it is unlikely that states will gold plate their own regulatory rules, as to do so would only serve to handicap their own industry. By harmonising the essential requirements in any given industry, excessive negative competition in regulatory standards is avoided, as member state rules cannot drop below the basic harmonised standard established in EU law. However, as regards all other non-harmonised rules, the applicable principle is mutual recognition, and thus some regulatory competition is ensured. Moreover, as we have seen, in order to facilitate the harmonisation of essential requirements, the Union authorities in the Single European Act removed the unanimity requirement as regards the adoption of internal market directives. So how does the internal market work as regards free movement? When looking at the internal market, it is necessary to distinguish between areas that have been the subject of an applicable directive and areas that have not. First, let's look at the situation where there is no applicable directive. If no directive has been adopted, under the Court of Justice decision in Cassis de Dijon, free movement is the operative principle as regards all goods, workers, services, circulating within the EU. However, member states remain free to establish a non-discriminatory barrier or an indistinctly applicable measure that respond to an overriding public interest. Or alternatively, a member state can adopt a discriminatory barrier limiting free movement. This is called a distinctly applicable measure, where the measure satisfies Article 36 of the TFU in the area of goods, for example. The second situation is the situation where an applicable directive has been adopted. If a directive has been adopted, then member states must apply its terms and thus between them establish a pan-European standard applicable to the area coming within the scope of the directive. However, harmonisation is limited to essential requirements. Thereafter, goods, workers, services, etc., in compliance with the directive, may then circulate freely throughout the EU on the basis of mutual recognition. Now, finally, let's take a look at the European committees that have been established to promote free movement. To assist in the harmonisation of the diverse regulatory standards, essential requirements that exist in the member states, the EU, under the new approach, has created the European Committee for Standardisation, or CEN, the European Committee for Electrotechnical Standardisation, CEN-ELEC, or the European Telecommunications Standards Institute, the ETSI. The role of these organisations is to draw up harmonised rules as regards technical standards for the manufacture of goods. Once adopted by directive, these rules are harmonised throughout the EU, and goods manufactured according to these rules receive a CE mark, Conformité Européenne, that allows them to move freely throughout the EU on the basis of mutual recognition. We hope you enjoyed this introduction to the European Union internal market.